The honourable member from Brantford Brant.
Mr. Firth admitted that he altered 2 resumes, replacing a 2-month internship with 51 months of professional experience. On another occasion, he inflated 7 years of experience to 12. He claimed that this was a mistake. He didn't have consent to manipulate the resumes. Isn't that correct?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, we've mentioned this previously in previous testimonies, but we encourage the RCMP to do investigation into the Butler allegations, whether it's fraud over 5,000, because we believe it's going to exonerate us.
The honourable member from Brantford Brant.
He clearly didn't answer the question. I'll move on. How many other times has Mr. Firth altered materials and resumes to the government since 2015?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, it's a common practice to engage with a resource, understand, because not everybody's CV or resume completely aligns with requirements that are coming out. They may have the experience, but we just have to speak with them to qualify that.
The honourable member from Brantford Brant.
I'm asking for the number, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I don't have a number.
The honourable member from Brantford Brant.
Mr. Firth's actions amounted to forgery under the criminal code. He altered resumes to secure government contracts, thereby fleecing the Canadian taxpayer. Isn't that correct?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, the allegations regarding the Butler resumes were on a contract that had already been awarded. So these were task authorizations. No contract would have been decided either way by these resumes. It was one business.
The honourable member from Brantford Brant.
Mr. Firth's actions further constituted a fraud on the Government of Canada. Section 380 of the Code stipulates that everyone who by deceit, falsehood, or other fraudulent means defrauds the public of any property, money, or valuable security. Both offences are punishable by indictment, and upon conviction, he could face a maximum prison sentence of 10 to 14 years. Is he aware of that?
Mr. Firth.
Again, Mr. Speaker, we're looking forward to the investigation by the RCMP because we believe it'll exonerate us.
I'd like to let the honourable member from Brantford Brant know that he has 25 seconds left on the clock.
Mr. Firth's actions were not accidental but intentional. This was not a mistake. He knew his resource would not qualify for taxpayer monies without manipulating their experience. Does Mr. Firth think that the Prime Minister or the Liberal Cabinet Minister should be at the bar answering questions today instead of himself, or is he willing to go to jail for them?
The honourable, Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, can I speak to my counsel, please?
Mr. Firth?
Mr. Speaker, I'm not even sure what the question is there.
Yeah, neither are we.
I wish to inform the honourable member that his time has elapsed.
No, understand the question. Stand up.
Well, I have to. I will, the honourable member from Brantford Brant. I'd like to inform him, and we will be able to show him this on the record. But actually, by the time you had finished your question, you had already elapsed the time that you had had.
I respect that, Mr. Speaker. Clearly indicated he didn't understand the question. In terms of fairness to Mr. Firth, he should be afforded an opportunity to be rephrasing the question, perhaps slower, so we can understand it and respond accordingly.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. Point of order.
The honourable member, the honourable deputy government house leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You started off today about talking about the importance of decorum, and I do not think it's appropriate for the member opposite to be challenging the Speaker when the rules, as you expressed them, were very clear. The time has expired. That means we move on to the next person, and he should not be challenging this chair.
I appreciate the intervention from the Deputy Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader. I'm going to take a moment to consult on this matter. The chair is going to permit the honourable member from Brantford Branch to please put a question within 10 seconds so that the witness, Mr. Firth, can answer the question.
Does Mr. Firth think that he should be solely responsible for this scam, or should the Prime Minister, the Liberal cabinet ministers, and certain members of the Liberal backbench should be at this bar facing consequences, legal consequences?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry, and again, I don't want to be elusive. I can't comment on this. That's kind of speculative, and I'm not sure what I can do here.
L'honorable député de Terrebonne.
The honourable member for Terrebonne. Mr. Speaker, far be it from me to defend the Canadian Parliament. After all, it's an institution that I would like Quebec to no longer owe anything to one day. But I do want to defend the principles that are embodied by this Parliament, respecting democratic institutions and the parliamentary democracy that Quebec is part of. A few weeks ago, the Auditor General's office tabled a report on the management of the ArriveCan app. According to her, the Auditor General, the management of this application was the worst she had seen in her career. It was supposed to cost $80,000, and in the end cost $60 million. Also in the AG report, we learned that a two-person business, whose owner is here now, pocketed more than $19 million for this project. That company, GC Strategies. We also learned that this ArriveCan file was only the tip of the iceberg. Recently, it was revealed that GC Strategies and its forerunner, Corridal Systems Consulting, received nearly $108 million in contracts from 2011. And manual searches found more additional contracts. We also learned in the AG report and others that there were various other things like whiskey tastings, dinners, golf tournaments, and others. These social occasions involved both Kristian Firth, the witness here today, and government officials. So it's perfectly healthy in a self-respecting democracy that parliamentarians who are responsible for ensuring that the state apparatus works well, it's completely appropriate that they closely examine what happened to ensure that it doesn't happen again. And that is why the owners of GC Strategies were asked to appear at committee on multiple occasions. Mr. Kristian Firth refused to answer numerous questions and compromised parliamentarians' work by not sending requested documents within a reasonable time. He even lied at committee, and he refused to send a list of public servants that he did business with. He did send it just now, but it is not complete, according to what we heard at committee. It's very clear that this points to major problems at the level of procurement. For nearly 50 years, it's been so hard to pre-select companies for the government to do business with that SMEs that don't actually offer any service of their own end up receiving commissions to indirectly put the government into contact with the companies that will actually do the work. It's completely absurd, Mr. Speaker. And here we have a person who profited from a broken system and pushed that to an extreme. I'll give an example. When the CBSA identified KPMG as being a business that it wanted to work with and that was already in the list of pre-approved businesses, CBSA contacted KPMG and the work was going to be done, but then a CBSA public servant called KPMG to announce that there would be an intermediary in the contract, which was GC Strategies. And we learned that Mr. Kristian Firth met with KPMG in that file, and that's exactly the problem, Mr. Speaker. It's that Kristian Firth and his two-person business did not deliver even the service that they said they would, a headhunting service, a recruitment service, that they did nothing, and that nonetheless they pocketed $84,000. So my question for Mr. Firth, does he think that taxpayers got value for their money for this $84,000?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for the question. The reality is this is common practice for people with existing contracts. They get subcontractors to come through their company because typically the time to procure directly even if you're an existing one of the 635 vendors that could do work with the government, it takes too long. So again, I was not aware of the file and what the urgency was and the deliverables, but I did know that there was timelines were very tight. So my assumption, again, this is being speculative, was they were leveraging the contract that I had because it needed to be done quickly.
The Honourable Member for Talbot. Mr. Speaker, based on what we heard at committee, public servants were doing their they're doing best for contracts to be granted quickly, which is why in certain cases there were uncompetitive RFPs. So once again, we're hearing contradictory things. According to Mr. Firth, why didn't this public servant just pick up the phone, call KPMG? Why did they instead tell KPMG that there would be an intermediary who would get $84,000 for doing nothing? Why does he think the public servant did that?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, again, not being elusive, I can't comment on why somebody picked up the phone in a government organization and made a call.
The Honourable Member for Talbot. Mr. Speaker, does Mr. Firth have a number in mind for the value of gifts in kind or money that was offered to public servants in exchange for contracts?
Mr. Speaker, yeah, that number is 0.
The Honourable Member for Talbot. Mr. Speaker, to sum up, Mr. Firth never paid for a coffee, a restaurant meal, a golf game, whiskey tasting, despite everything we heard at committee?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, yeah, I've admitted I would go out and I would invite government employees to lunches, to coffee, but understanding that if they were to show up, they'd already asked, they're gone through the regular chain of command and have already asked permission to accept that.
The Honourable Member for Talbot. Well, this is a good example of a contradiction. We went from saying that the amount is 0 to admitting that indeed there were dinners, golf games, whiskey tastings with dozens of federal public servants and so on. So I will repeat my question then. What's the number there, whether it be in kind or in money? What is the amount given to federal public servants?
Mr. Speaker, the first question was specific to what was given to receive contracts by government employees. That's why I said it was 0. Once the contracts had been awarded through regular procurement practices, they became a client, and we would have frequent meetings to check on the health of the project, whether that was over lunch or whether that was during coffee.
The Honourable Member. But why do that if it was not to obtain federal contracts?
Mr. Firth.
Because I'm looking for Mr. Speaker, I'm looking for a health check on how my resources are performing and whether or not also I need to replace any if they're not.
The Honourable Member. These people with whom the witness had coffee with or whiskey tastings, had he pre-identified them as people who could grant him contracts, or were they simply people that he just met in the street?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, they were clients who we engaged with once we'd won the contracts.
Monsieur le Président, c'est ce qu'on appelle.
Mr. Speaker, that is clearly offering a service paid in kind to obtain a contract. That's the very definition. Next question. Mr. Firth justified his hourly rate, $2,600 per hour, by the fact that he didn't just work 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. Does he believe that Canadians and Quebecers got bang for their buck for that amount of money that they paid for many hours of Mr. Firth's time?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, the hours that we're quoting were specific to ArriveCan. We had 22 other departments and other contracts we were working on at that time. And I'd like to also remind that we were picked. We didn't solicit, and we provided services to over 50 resources were in there and delivered on 170 releases on the application.
L'honorable député de Terrebonne, qui a 1 minute.
The Honourable Member, 90 seconds. Mr. Firth and Mr. Anthony met at Veritac, which was accused of colluding on contracts in 2009. At the time, Mr. Firth was working there. The judge who looked at the matter stated that all employees should receive anti-collusion training. Does Mr. Firth remember anything from that training?
Cette séance, pour l'instant,
I will just interrupt this for a moment.
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, in 2009 at Veritech, I was a recruiter. I was not involved in the sales cycle whatsoever, so I don't think I had training in 2009.
L'honorable député de Terrebonne.
The honorable member for Terrebonne. Well, even a recruiter is considered an employee of a business, so that's a real shame. What we see here today, Mr. Speaker, is that there's a real problem in procurement, and there's been a loss of control when it comes to gifts accepted by public servants, as we've seen today. So I think that CPSA, which was one of the main government agencies to offer contracts to GC Strategies, should be placed under examination because Quebecers and Canadians need to get back the money that was wasted on this business and others.
Mr. Firth, if you would like to answer, you have about 13 seconds.
Mr. Speaker, I know we can stop the clock. Can I please have the question again, please? I wasn't getting through in my headphones very well.
On va demander l'honorable député de Terrebonne à répéter.
I will ask the member to repeat. Mr. Speaker, does the witness agree that if public servants didn't respect internal procedures, they should either lose their jobs or, if this is a generalized problem at the CPSA, that agency should be placed under monitoring?
Mr. Speaker, I believe if there's any wrongdoing that's been found, there should be repercussions.
The honourable member from Edmonton-Griesbach now has the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I think Canadians across the country, members of Parliament, are disappointed, not just in the dramatic failure of the procurement system in our country to address the real issues of value for money, but it sheds light on what is a terrible instance of reporting, missing information, lost invoicing, and we don't even know the total amount today. Mr. Speaker, this is a serious and grave matter facing our country, and one that stems back now decades. We heard that through testimony at the Public Accounts Committee, to which I'm a member, several times from other contractors that would speak to us about the tremendous vulnerability that exists in Canada's procurement system, but also exists in the lack of investment in our public sector. According to the Globe and Mail, for instance, since 2017, GC Strategies has received $46 million in federal funding. The flow of tax dollars to GC has increased steadily each year, growing from $32.6 million in the 2016-2017 fiscal year to $80.3 million in the 21-22 fiscal year. Now, according to the Auditor General, GC Strategies' ArriveCan app cost Canadians almost $60 million. And the total is still undetermined due to that very lack of documentation and paper trail, a serious and grave error in and of itself. On top of that, we noticed that this vulnerability of our public service and procurement creates a system where insiders are able to profit in extreme amounts because of a system that doesn't have the proper accountability, that doesn't have the proper follow-through, and albeit in this particular instance, lack of proper procurement. Canadians are rightly disappointed. Not only that, they're angry with the very real fact that Canadians wake up every single day, they go to work, they pay their taxes, and they do everything right. And then to be told that the tax dollar that they work so hard for isn't going to closing the gaps in social or economic outcomes or material benefit for Canadians, but is going towards the dramatic outsourcing of jobs that Canadians in our public service could do. I recognize that not all IT services, of course, can be dealt with here at the House of Commons or in our public service, but that a great deal of it could. So my questions now through you, Mr. Speaker, to Mr. Firth. When did Mr. Firth first start doing contracts and business with the Government of Canada?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, my first contract would purely mean 2011.
The honourable member from Edmonton Griesbach.
What are the names of your various companies that have contracted or subcontracted with the Government of Canada since that time?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I can't probably remember them all, but I'll do as best I can. So, KP. Sorry, can I get qualification on that question, please?
We'll stop the clock. Do you need to consult with your... Or I'm not certain what you're asking me, Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I just want qualifications if you're speaking about my companies or companies that we do sub work through.
The honourable member from Edmonton Griesbach.
Mr. Speaker, I'm inquiring as to the names of the companies that he is the owner or co-owner of since the time of 2011 that has been doing business with the Government of Canada.
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, the only IT staffing firm I've had is GC Strategies as an owner. We were not part of Codale.
The honourable member from Edmonton Griesbach.
Does Mr. Firth believe the work that his company has done, GC Strategies, in relation to ArriveCan was good money for Canadian dollar?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I believe the team we put forward, and again, as attested to by AWS, Microsoft, and BDO, were the only ones at that point that had capacity to build this application. So I'd say yes.
The honourable member from Edmonton Griesbach.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Firth in the past has spoken about his worries or concerns or even at times perceived rejection of the Auditor General's report, in particular to this fact as well in regards to dollar or value for money. What does Mr. Firth have to say in relation to the Auditor General's report on value for money?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not questioning the report. I'm just, again, it's the inputs that were given to the report. There's a big delta between the 19.1 million that that the AG's report claimed that we used to build the application versus the 11. But because of the financial system and the tagging for other projects associated, because these contracts were pandemic response contracts, they weren't specific to ArriveCan app, I can understand why there's a discrepancy.
Member for Edmonton Griesbach.
Now, Mr. Speaker, Canadians know that when our public service does the job, that they're doing it knowing that the most important piece to that is the outcome for Canadians, making sure that the service is truly up to the standard that Canadians expect. When we outsource that work, when we take that job away from the public sector, when we take it away from those who work for the better good of our country, it comes with a price. It comes with commission and it comes with profit by the private sector in this particular instance. So how much money did Mr. Firth take home from these contracts?
Firth.
Mr. Speaker, again, not being elusive, I don't have that exact number in front of me. Sorry.
The honourable member from Edmonton Griesbach.
Mr. Speaker, it's difficult to not be able to supply such a number when, as a matter of fact, the company would have been the responsible for not only issuing invoices or issuing the amount owed to them, but it's also up to an owner of a company to administer and to have paperwork for their employees, including themselves if they're paid. Does Mr. Firth suggest that he hasn't paid himself or hasn't kept track of payments to himself? And if not, how can we in this chamber are able to get this information and what he supplied in writing later?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, sorry, I can answer that question. I just don't have the answer right in front of me right now. Like I was not given a set of questions that will be coming at me in the next hour and 20 minutes. Sorry.
Mr. Firth, there was a second part to that question.
Can I ask the honourable member to repeat it, please?
Clock is stopped. The honourable member from Edmonton Griesbach.
Would Mr. Firth supply the amount he took home from government contracts?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I think that information has been provided to the committee.
The honourable member from Edmonton Griesbach.
You and your partner, or Mr. Firth and his partner, Mr. Anthony, have both made accusations that the Auditor General's report is false and that she is lying. He made clarity to my question in relation to some of the numbers supplied. In addition to those numbers of supply, what other areas of that report would Mr. Firth contest?
Mr. Firth.
Off the top of my head, Mr. Speaker, the numbers one is the one that's caused the most media attention, and so that would be the one that I would be more focused on making sure that was corrected.
The honourable member from Edmonton-Griesbach.
The Office of the Procurement Ombudsman says that, quote, overly restrictive mandatory solicitation criteria favored GC Strategies for a $25 million contract. GC Strategies had been involved in the development of their requirements, which were included by the CBSA in a request for proposal for a contract ultimately won by Mr. Firth. To be clear, Mr. Firth's company, GC Strategies, by evidence of the Ombudsman, participated in the recommendations set out in a request for proposal to which Mr. Firth's company applied and was awarded a contract. Does Mr. Firth understand that the Auditor General concluded in that investigation that there was no evidence to the effect that GC Strategies supplied a proposal even to get this contract? Can Mr. Firth please explain how and who from the CBSA requested information related to a contract like the one that they were recipient of, and what aspects of that proposal did Mr. Firth supply for requirement?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like just a quick clarification on the question. The Auditor General identified no proposal for the national security exemption ones, not I don't think the one that we're discussing right now.
Mr. Griesbach. I'm sorry, the honourable member from Edmonton-Griesbach.
In what capacity was Mr. Firth involved in developing and contributing to the CBSA requirements for the ArriveCan contract?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, the previously mentioned there are 220 requirements in that RFP. There were 3 suggestions we put forward, understanding that they need to know the technology stack, they need to know the types of resources they would need. From that point onwards, that was everything. And the 220 other requirements were all public information that could be obtained through buy and sell or any other RFP that's hit the street. And on top of that as well, it was PSPC that still deemed 40 qualified vendors who could respond to this RFP.
The honourable member from Edmonton-Griesbach.
Can Mr. Firth please explain the process, in particular the timeline of events, that enabled Mr. Firth's contribution to that RFP?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I was approached in May of 2021, I believe, for suggestions and understanding what kind of requirements they would need for a team to continue the work. And I believe the contract was awarded a year later, and there was no conversation in between that.
The honourable member from Edmonton-Griesbach has 20 seconds on the clock.
Does Mr. Firth believe that to be a conflict of interest?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I do not. Again, these were 3 suggestions of 220 that went through multiple levels, that went through multiple departments before it being even awarded and evaluated.
This concludes the second round of questioning. Mr. Firth, would you like a pause before the House proceeds to the next round of questions?
Mr. Speaker, yes, please.
La séance est suspendue jusqu'à la...
The sitting is suspended to the call of the chair. Order. The sitting will now resume.
The sitting will now resume. The House will now proceed to the third round of questions. Each recognized party and the Green Party will have 5 minutes. La Chambre procédera.
The House will now proceed to the third round of questioning. Each recognized party and the Green Party will have 5 minutes each.
All questions are to be addressed through the chair.
I would remind honourable members that all questions are to be directed to the chair.
The honourable member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Mr. Firth said today that he was completely unaware of connections between Vaughan Brennan and senior Liberal staffer Jeremy Broadhurst, completely unaware of connections to senior Liberals. But Mr. Firth received a text on February 1st, 2021 that was subsequently reported in the Globe and Mail that specifically described the involvement of the Deputy Prime Minister's office where Broadhurst was Chief of Staff. Does Mr. Firth want to correct his earlier response?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I have no knowledge. I cannot remember sending that text message.
The honourable member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Mr. Firth received a text message on February 1st, 2021. It was reported in the Globe and Mail. That report in the Globe and Mail, along with other information, sparked subsequent hearings at the Government Operations Committee. Is Mr. Firth claiming he didn't read that article or the text?
He skims.
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I cannot remember that text message and I can't remember that article.
The honourable member from Fort Saskatchewan, Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
A final chance to tell the truth. Will the witness tell the House about any connections and relationships between him and Jeremy Broadhurst, or that he is aware of between Vaughan Brennan and Jeremy Broadhurst? He received texts. It's in the Globe and Mail. Will he tell the truth?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, again, I do not know of any communications when I did not remember that text message, or I haven't seen the article.
The honourable member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Mr. Firth claimed today that it is common practice for clients to request and receive suggestions about the content of RFPs from those who bid on. How many times since 2015 has GC Strategies provided these kinds of suggestions to government clients regarding RFPs that they then bid on?
Mr. Firth.
Again, Mr. Speaker, without being elusive here, I do not have that number. I don't know.
The honourable member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Will the witness undertake to provide a response to that question in writing to the Speaker and the Government Operations Committee within 14 days?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, we were kind of spoken to previously. Do we have to provide information to the House?
I'm going to pause the session while I consult the chair. To all honourable members, the process which was set forth by the House was that subsequent to this, to the calling of the bar and the admonishment and responding to questions and supplementary questions, that this matter, the answers from the questions that are being provided by Mr. Firth would be referred to the to the House committee for them to evaluate and to make recommendations. The honourable member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan, rising on a point of order.
The witness has asked if he has to provide responses.
Right.
I would submit to you that the whole reason he is here is because he has refused to provide responses. This is why the House is taking this matter so seriously.
So what I understood Mr. Firth to say to the honourable member was that he was asking whether or not he had to to provide a response to the Speaker of the House. The point that I was making before in terms of the order that the House had set out, the order that the House had passed, was that what testimony is brought here today will be referred to the committee. The honourable member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Will the witness provide the response in writing to the question I have asked that he claims to be unable to answer? Will he provide it in writing within 14 days to the Speaker and the committee, yes or no?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, yes, I will.
The honourable member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Why did the government go to GC Strategies for this sort of advice? How did GC become a favoured contractor and advisor regarding RFPs to the Government of Canada?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I got my first contract in 2011 and have done subsequently since by just responding to RFPs. I haven't become, I don't think, I mean, it's flattering to be a recognised person to provide requirements and help for the federal government.
Order. We're looking for members to conduct themselves in a manner that is befitting of this occasion. The honourable member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Speaker, it's very flattering indeed. According to committee testimony, Mr. Firth received $2,600 per hour spent working on ArriveScam. That's substantially more than the earnings of an average NHL player. Very flattering that they came to him for advice. Very flattering that he was paid so much. Does he see this as a reasonable rate of compensation for what he did?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, again, in the testimony, they were quoting hours towards ArriveCan. We had 22 other departments and 20 other contracts we were working at the same time. It's impossible for me to spend 250 hours on one contract when I have to service and maintain other projects with other clients.
The honourable member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Is the witness involved with any other companies?
Mr. Firth.
So, just my holdco, that is the 50% owner of GC Strategies.
The honourable member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
What is that holdco, and does it do business with the Government of Canada?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, my holdco is a numbered company that was used to register the name GC Strategies.
The honourable member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Does it do business with the Government of Canada directly?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, it does not.
The honourable member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
The witness discussed the health of contracts outside the office with Paul Gerard, Treasury Board CIO. Did he discuss replacing resources or increasing resources at that time?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I've had many conversations with Paul Gerard. I can't remember every single one of them.
The honourable member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan only has a brief period of time, but he's been asking very quick questions.
Did he discuss new contracts? And since he claims to be unable to answer that question, will he respond to it in writing as well?
The honourable, sorry, Mr. Firth.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker, I thought I did answer the question.
I'm going to ask the honourable member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan to rephrase the question.
The question was, in meetings outside the office with Paul Gerard, did they discuss replacing resources or increasing resources? Did they discuss new contracts? And if the witness is unable to answer that question, will he provide a response in writing?
Mr. Firth.
I will respond in writing. I don't have all those information and I don't have every conversation with Mr. Gerard catalogued.
Questioning by the member for La Prairie. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Earlier, the witness mentioned that he had doctored 2 CVs that led to the attribution of the contracts.
Mr. Speaker, I don't think I said that earlier.
The honourable member for La Prairie. I'm convinced that he did. I was here. I don't understand why he said that he didn't say that, because earlier the Conservative mentioned, did you doctor 2 CVs? He said yes, but after the contracts were awarded. Did I misunderstand?
Mr. Speaker, I didn't say I doctored 2 resumes. I said that the business was already won. I didn't amend any resumes to win any contracts. And the contracts were for the resumes were for a task authorization that was already won business.
The honourable member for La Prairie. He didn't say that he then amended. He amended the contracts after. The CVs after.
Mr. Speaker, I've never amended a contract.
The honourable member for La Prairie. Earlier, our witness said that public servants got changes after the contracts were given. Is that what he said?
Mr. Speaker, sorry, I do not understand the question.
We will suspend the clock, and I will invite the member for La Prairie to ask his question once again. I'm ready. Can I go? Earlier, the member for Terrebonne asked the question, did you already pay monies or get gifts in kind to public servants? And the witness said yes, but only after contracts were awarded. Is that true?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, yeah, we don't give gifts and do bribes to win contracts.
The honourable member for La Prairie. He said earlier that he paid for restaurants or things like this to public servants, but he said that he did after contracts were awarded. Is that true?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, that's correct. We would always, once a contract's been awarded, you want to have a relationship with your client to understand if your resources are doing a good job or if they're not, and try and pivot and move as fast as possible to replace them. The fact that the invitation went out and the officials showed up suggested that they followed the code of conduct and they had already asked permission from their superiors.
The honourable member for La Prairie. So for a public servant, for him is the client. Is that correct?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, if we're doing government business, correct.
The honourable member for La Prairie. Is it possible that when you give premiums or gifts after a contract, is that before another contract, possibly?
Mr. Firth.
I believe it would be before another contract, but that doesn't mean that it's for me.
The honourable member for La Prairie. So, inaudible for the interpreter.
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, it was inaudible for the translator.
We will stop the clock and ask the member to re-ask the question. If I may, Mr. Speaker, I will conclude based on what we heard today. So it's normal for border services to deal with GC strategies, to give them $19 million without having exceptional skills or that they be necessary in obtaining contracts or the disclosure of contracts. We also have to accept the fact that public servants got gifts before or after. It's not clear. We have to accept the fact that GC strategies help to draft contracts and tenders because the Border Services Agency doesn't have the skills to know its own needs and its own criteria when the time comes to develop a tender or request for a proposal. And this is very concerning, and we are supposed to find this normal that somebody would get $84,000 for nothing. And we're talking about this money for which nothing was done. So here who is at fault here? That's the question. Perhaps it's the Canada Border Services Agency's fault, perhaps at the tip of the iceberg, but it's not normal, Mr. Speaker. Listen. The Auditor General said that this was the worst bookkeeping she'd ever seen. This is not normal right now. The Canada Border Services Agency is working on a system to record imports, GCRA, and the committee of the House of Commons said that there are a number of irregularities. It's of concern that this agency continues to do its work after what we've heard today, and this government must, and this agency must be more responsible. It must be under trusteeship. We must get the money back, taxpayers' money that was spent for reasons that we still don't understand, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Mr. Firth, if you would like to, although there might not have been a question, if you'd like to make a comment, I'll allow you this time to do so.
Mr. Speaker, I'm good. Thank you.
Reprise de question.
Resuming the questions, the honourable member for New Westminster, Burnaby.
The honourable member from New Westminster, Burnaby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now that, through you to Mr. Firth, now that you're aware of the powers of Parliament, I wanted to ask through you to Mr. Firth whether he regrets not answering the questions that were asked of him, not once, not twice, but 3 times at the Government Operations Committee.
Mr. Speaker, absolutely. I've sent that in writing to, I believe, to all members of Parliament prior to coming here for apologies for that.
The honourable member from New Westminster, Burnaby.
I would like to know if Mr. Firth met with any members of Parliament during the process for the RFP, for the contract for ArriveCan, or during the contract process.
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, no, I did not.
Honourable member from New Westminster, Burnaby.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I would like to know if Mr. Firth, outside of the committees where he has been brought to formally, if he has ever met or spoken with any members of Parliament from regardless of which party.
Mr. Firth,
Mr. Speaker, can I speak to my counsel for 2 seconds, please?
clock is stopped. Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, no, I have not.
The honourable member from New Westminster Burnaby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just to be clear, Mr. Firth has not had any private conversations at any point with any member of Parliament over the period of the committee hearings. And I'm not talking about committees themselves. I'm talking about private conversations, hallway conversations, phone calls, anything of that nature.
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I have not.
The honourable member from New Westminster Burnaby.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a scandal. When we talk about the ArriveCan app, we haven't seen this kind of scandal since the Harper regime. And we saw a scandal that cost Canadian taxpayers $400 million. At the time, we were talking about a majority Conservative government, and they refused in any way whatsoever to get the answers that Canadians were looking for. And of course, Mr. Speaker, that Conservative scandal was one for which we never got the information. And we saw then the ArriveCan scandal where, since this is a minority parliament, we are now getting the answers. So this is something that's extremely important because we're talking about the parliamentary power that we have. And in a majority government, as we saw under Harper, we were not able to get the answers on the $400 million that disappeared under the Conservatives without any transparency. Today, we have the possibility, however, of getting more answers, and I think that this is important. So Mr. Firth, he talked earlier about the fact that he influenced, if I understood, 3 elements only of the 230 requirements in those contracts. Is Mr. Firth saying that he did not influence the contract, or is he saying that he didn't influence the scandal as much as is claimed?
Mr. Speaker, the answer is correct to both of those. I had no influence at all on the contract award, and I had no influence on the ArriveCan scandal.
The honourable member for New Westminster Burnaby. Earlier, Mr. Firth spoke about the fact that he had changed the resumes. We're talking, of course, and this is in the committee testimony, that there was somebody who had 13 years of experience. That was not true. And there was also other pieces of information that were changed with regard to those individuals. I would like to ask 2 questions, Mr. Speaker. First, does Mr. Firth regret that these resumes were falsified? And second, reminds the fact that to date the federal government has not asked for those amounts to be repaid. We're talking about those amounts. So, Mr. Firth, the question to Mr. Firth is he prepared to repay to the Canadian public the controversial amounts in the awarding of these contracts?
Mr. Speaker, the Butler contract was no way related to the ArriveCan application, and furthermore, I made $0 margin on the Butler opportunity.
Maintenant, c'est en reprise des questions.
Resuming questions, the honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
The honourable member from Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the opportunity to participate in this historic, unprecedented occasion. I'd like to put this question through you, Mr. Speaker, to Mr. Firth. I know he will not have them with him at the moment, but will he provide to Parliament, through the Speaker and to the Operations Committee, the full list of all website domains that he has registered or requested to be registered in pursuit of his business as an IT staffing firm?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, I can do that.
The honourable member from Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you. I'd like to review some of the answers that the witness gave earlier today. To the honourable member for Skeena-Bulkley Valley, when asked if he would like to have had, if he thinks back on it and reflects on his answers to committee, if he wished he'd answered differently. And his answer was he wishes he could have answered more concisely. I'd like to put it to the witness, through you, Mr. Speaker, that no one has accused him of answers that were verbose. He's been accused of and found to have answered in ways that were evasive and dishonest. Would he like to amend his answer to say he wishes he had answered honestly in the first instance?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, again, as a result of this abolishment, there's a lot of mistakes I've made. That's why I was here. So the answer would be yes.
Thank you.
The honourable member from Saanich Gulf Islands.
In response to questions from the honourable member for Mégantic Érable, he similarly had said earlier today, I made mistakes. Is it correct to say that when the witness says I made mistakes, he is acknowledging that he behaved in ways that amounted to a contempt of Parliament by being deliberately misleading, evasive, and dishonest? And I would also suggest that most Canadians would not consider these to be mistakes, but deliberate efforts to mislead Parliament.
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, they were mistakes. I have a lot of respect for this, and this was not deliberately misleading.
The honourable member from Saanich Gulf Islands.
I'd like, Mr. Speaker, in the last few moments that we have here with the witness, I'm trying to put myself in the position of a Canadian watching this on television and wondering, how could this happen? I think it's clear on a factual basis and respecting this place and everyone in it that there's been here, this example, as the Auditor General has found, as the Ombudsman has found, an appalling failure of our procurement process that's completely unacceptable. And the individuals involved in GC strategies, particularly Mr. Firth and his partner, have benefited personally from what can best be described as extremely dodgy business practices. I'd like to ask on behalf of the people of Canada and it's an obvious question, I'm not suggesting there is an answer, but I'd like to ask Mr. Firth, is he a member of any political party? Does he donate to any particular party? Has he been involved in currying favor with any party or political parties in this country?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, no, I have not.
The honourable member from Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you. I'm pursuing evidence that you gave to the Government Operations Committee on October 20th. It's a very interesting skill set which you have, which Mr. Speaker, which the witness has to obtain these various contracts. Mr. Firth said that between, quote, my business partner Darren and me, we have 30 years of experience dealing with IT companies, or whether dealing with independent consultants, or we have the luxury of dealing with true subject matter firms. We build a network in which we know the people. Is it the case, to ask the witness, that the business experience, which gained him millions of dollars in personal benefit, amount to having an extensive Rolodex of people in the Ottawa area whom he entertains?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, it has afforded us the luxury of having a large Rolodex of resources we can use and get them contracts within the federal government.
Remaining very brief question to the honourable member from Saanich Gulf Islands.
Mr. Firth, given the experience here and knowing that you have health challenges, all I can say is, aren't you ashamed?
Mr. Firth.
Mr. Speaker, do I have to answer that?
Yes. Yes, you do.
No, I am not ashamed. I think
it is my duty to inform the House that Mr. Firth's presence at the bar is no longer required and that the order is discharged. Il est mon devoir d'informer la Chambre que la
It is my duty to inform the House that Mr. Firth's presence at the bar is no longer required and that the order is discharged. Mr. Firth, you are now excused from the bar and will be escorted out by the Sergeant at Arms.
Mr. Firth, you are now excused from the bar and will be escorted out by the Sergeant at Arms. It being 5:44, the House will now proceed to the taking of the deferred recorded division on the motion at third reading stage of Bill S-209 under private members' business. Comme il est 17h.
It being 5:44 p.m., the House will now proceed to the taking of the deferred recorded division on the motion at third reading stage of Bill S-209 under private members' business. Call in the members.
Call in the members.